Hi guys, it's Mrs. Salcetta. I'm here to show you how to complete your work for October 14th or October 15th, depending on if you're an A day or a B day. So make sure you're on the assignment with the correct date, either 10/14 or 10/15. There's actually only one document on here. It's going to be a Google slide with your name on it, a Google slide with your name on it. Once you open up your Google slide, the first slide on here is a double bubble map. And this is focused on our units for distance versus our units for time versus our units for speed. So this is a sort. You have to click on the text box and so you can move it around. So you have to think, is hours a unit of distance? If it was, I'd put it here. Or is hours a unit of time? So I want you to notice time, speed, distance. So we have 3 time units to go in these 3 circles. You'll have 3 distance units to go in these 3 circles. So we need to look at meters. Is meters a distance unit or is it a time unit? Then you need to decide about speed. Speed has 2 circles. Speed is a combination of distance and time. So you would have to, meters per second, is that a speed or is meters per second a distance or is meters per second a time? So you have to decide where would you put that. So you're going to have 2 speed units, 3 distance units, and 3 time units. So you'll sort these out. Once you're done sorting that, we're going to practice using a graph to calculate speed, which is the first time you've done this, so it's going to be challenging at first. So I'm going to work through these problems with you, and you'll do a couple on your own. So I'm going to insert a text box so you can see me typing my work down. So whenever you're doing a speed problem, I want you to write down the formula just so we know what we're looking for. So S equals D over T. Speed equals distance divided by time. So down here it says average speed from point A to point B. So we need to figure out what's the speed from point A to point B. So point A is starting at 0. Point B, if we're looking at, well actually let's first look at our X and Y axis. So we have our distance on the y-axis, and I always remember that y is going up and down because I say y to the sky. So our y-axis is pointed to the sky. Distance will always be on the y-axis. Down at the bottom on our x-axis, you'll have time. It even tells you the units you should be using. So for the distance, it's in kilometers. For the time, it's in minutes. So now we see that A for distance is at 0. Let's find the distance it traveled to get to point B. So you would slide your cursor up to point B. And so what is our distance for point B? So you have to have your cursor on point B and then follow that line all the way to the left until you hit a number on our y-axis. That will be your distance. So this B is on the same line as that number 3. So from point A to point B, they traveled a distance of 3 kilometers. And you could imagine these points being actual places if you want. You could say that point A is your house. Point B is your school. So you started at home and you walked 3 kilometers to get to point B, your school. Now, how long did it take you to walk from point A to point B? We know that it was 3 kilometers, but how long did it take you to walk that 3 kilometers? So you'll be at point B, and you need to follow the line directly down to the time on the x-axis. And that takes us directly to 5. And that's 5 minutes. So it took 5 minutes to get from point A to point B, which was 3 kilometers away. So we have our distance from point A to point B. They traveled 3 kilometers. So S equals 3 kilometers divided by the time. Our time A started at 0. As we move down to B, our time has increased to 5 minutes. So we'll put 5m for our time. This is when you're going to need a calculator. I want you to notice that the smaller number is coming first in this case. I've had kids ask me before, does a big number always come first? That is not true. The big number does not always come first. Distance always comes first, whether it's a smaller number or a larger number. So it's 3 divided by 5. So you get your calculator. Three divided by 5. That'll give you 0.6. So the speed is 0.6. That is not just 0.6. You need to bring down the kilometers and the minutes, or units for speed, kilometers per minute. So it's 0.6 kilometers per minute. And so that's our answer for the average speed from point A to point B. And so you could go down here and write that 0.6 kilometers per minute. So I want you to show me your work and answer the question. So the first part of the graph is always the easiest. The first points are always the easiest to do. The second points and the third points, those get a little bit harder because now you have to do a little bit of additional math to figure out the distance and the time. So I'm going to insert another text box, and this time we're going to figure out the average speed from point B to point C. So just a reminder of our formula, we're using S equals D divided by T. So B is at a distance of 3. We need to figure out how much distance did it take to get from point B back to point C. So we could say that point B is starting, right, at 3 kilometers. How far did it have to travel to get back down here to C? So what distance is C at? C is at a distance, if you put your cursor on C, and you travel all the way over, you'll notice C is at 0. C is at 0. Point C is at 0. So point B started at 3 kilometers, and we're down back at 0. So how much distance does it take to get from 3 to 0? How much is between 3 and 0? And so the distance that they traveled is 3. So speed equals 3 kilometers divided by the time. So now we need to figure out the time. So B's time was at 5. C's time is at 9. So you need to find the difference. How long did it take to get from the 5 seconds to the 9 seconds? From point B to point C. B started at 5. By the time you got to point C, now it's at 9 minutes. So how many minutes does it take to get from 5 minutes to 9 minutes? So you could go to a calculator if you wanted to and take the larger time, which is 9, subtract the smaller time, which is 5. That'll give you 4. Another option, you could use your fingers. I started with 5 minutes and I ended at 9. So let's see how many minutes to get to 9. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 4 minutes. Took 4 minutes. So the distance is 3 kilometers. The time is 4 minutes. So you're going to do your calculation again with your calculator. 3 divided by 4. Gives you 0.75. But not just 0.75. It's 0.75 kilometers per minute. So we showed our work. Now we can go down here and write our full answer, 0.75 kilometers per minute. Okay, and then there's a couple for you to do on your own. You'll do point A to B on your own, and then you'll do point C and D on your own. I'm going to show you how to calculate point B to point C. So this is how we're going to calculate from point B to point C. This one's a little bit harder because this is a flat line. So this changes a little bit about what we're doing. So we need to find what's our distance from B to C. What's our distance from B to C? So we're still using the same formula, speed equals distance divided by time. We're just using the graph to locate our distance and locate the time. So if we're looking for the distance and the time between point B and C, let's start with our distance. So B is at 6. If you put your cursor on B and you slide to the left, you'll see that B is at a distance of 6 kilometers. They traveled 6 kilometers. So let's see how far did they travel to get to point C. So put your cursor on point C and then just move over to the left and you'll see that C is also at a distance of 6. So how far did they have to travel to get from 6 kilometers to 6 kilometers? So they didn't have to travel at all. And so I want you to notice this line is flat because the distance is not increasing anymore. They're no longer moving. So we started at 6 kilometers. When we get to point C, we're still at 6 kilometers. We haven't moved. And so our distance for this would actually be 0 kilometers. And we can still find our time though. So B, put your cursor on B to find out the time that B started at. So B, and then move your cursor all the way down on that line, and you'll see that B lands on 15. But that's not your time because I want to see how long did it take to get from B to C. So we started at 15, but now we need to see where we ended on C. So we're going to go to C, and we'll travel down till we get to 35. C is at 35 minutes. B started at 15 minutes. By the time we got to point C, we're at 35 minutes. So how much time did it take to get from 15 minutes to 35 minutes? You have a couple options of how you could do it. You could take the larger time, 35, and subtract the smaller time, 15. And that will give you the difference, which is 20. So the time between 15 minutes and 35 minutes is 20 minutes. So it took them 20 minutes to get from point B to point C. So 0 kilometers in 20 minutes. So they traveled 0 kilometers in 20 minutes. So no distance during that 20-minute period. So if you were to take 0 and divide it by 20, what would you get? We can go to our calculator and see. 0 divided by 20 gives you 0. There's no speed. There's no speed because for this period of time, the object's at rest. It's not moving. The distance is staying the same. They're not moving. So this is a speed of 0 kilometers. So your job now is to figure out the distance from A to B. This one will be the easiest. We just need to see how much distance did it travel to get to B and how much time did it take. And then divide your distance by your time to get your speed. C to D will be a little bit harder, just like B to C was a little bit more challenging. So you have to see that C started at this distance. What distance did it end at? We need to find the difference. Then we need to see the time that C's at. Compare that to the time that D's at. We need to find the difference. If you're having trouble, then you can comment on the assignment. Just figure out those two speed calculations. Once you're done with that, you can spend the rest of your time studying on quizzes or Quizlet, because we do have a quiz on Friday and Monday. Like I said, comment with questions, please.